The Flesh That Speaks by Samuel D. Hilson. Come on, bro, Abertha persisted, nudging Gilduin's elbow, but for once his normally good-natured friend shook his head firmly. No can do, mate, he said, turning as if to not only change the subject, but remove himself from the conversation entirely. No one's going to know you snuck me in, Abertha said, placing a hand on his shoulder and quite literally drawing him back into the discussion. You're on the catering team. Who's going to notice one more waiter? Trust me, Abs, said Gilduin seriously. The security there is insane. There'll be loads of important people there, and they do a full background check on all the staff. You have to get your retina and fingerprints scanned just to get in the front gates. What? Is it a sex party or something? Abertha pressed, his interest heightened rather than diminished. Loads of drugs and orgies? That's typical rich people shit. What's got you so on edge? I'm not, Gilduin snapped, his tone contrasting with his words. Look, just drop it, Abs. I can't get you into that party. Gods, okay, Abertha said, rolling his eyes. Geez, I just thought I'd ask. What's gotten into you these days? Nothing. Gilduin sighed, shrugging into his coat. Come on, let's go for a pint. Abertha didn't see Gilduin for the next few days, even though they were roommates. The night of the party came and went. Gilduin appeared around the apartment again, but something was bothering him. He seldom joked anymore, and the carefree look in his eyes was replaced by a haunted one. He avoided all Abertha's attempts to discover his change in attitude, and he drank more than the entire time Abertha had known him. Then one day, something happened that put Gilduin's troubles firmly to the back of his mind. He had just finished his shift at the fuel refinery. He had showered and changed at the factory, and was considering whether he could tempt Gilduin to join him for a drink. But his friend had grown so antisocial and drank so much these days, he was reluctant to encourage his friend's vices. Then he saw her. Her hovercraft was built to resemble a carriage, with 6 cyber steeds drawing it, although their presence was purely aesthetic. She was sitting by the window, talking to the cybernetic driver. She glanced over the droid's shoulder and noticed him. Her gaze lingered on him, her eyes running up and down his body. He was flattered by the open display of attention and returned her stare with a smile. She inclined her head coyly and beckoned him over with an elegantly manicured finger. "And what's your name, young man?" she purred in a velvety voice. As he drew closer, he realized she must be a little older than he'd first thought. This fact did nothing to undermine her beauty, and he fixed his most charming grin on his face. "Abertha," he said, adding, "but my friends call me Abs." "I should certainly like to be included as your friend," the woman said coquettishly, "but I wouldn't dream of bastardizing such a lovely name." He shrugged self-deprecatingly. "It sounds like a girl's name," he said sheepishly. She clucked her tongue with another dazzling smile. "Not at all," she said. "It's a unisex name, like Marion or Ashley, though unisex names do inevitably end up being more popular among women rather than men. I, for one, like your name exceedingly." "Well," said Abertha, trying to take the compliment and disregard the memories of years of torment, "I certainly appreciate that. Speaking of names, what's yours?" "Oh, forgive me," the woman said with a musical laugh. "Mara Wainwright." She held out a slender hand for him to shake. As he took it, he suddenly realized the hand was cybernetic, rather than the well-manicured fingers he thought he'd seen from a distance. Smooth as porcelain, the hand was a glistening alabaster white, with gilded gold inlays between the intricate joints of the fingers and knuckles. On an impulse, he raised her hand to his lips. "A pleasure," he said. "Well, aren't you a smooth customer?" Mara said with another of her musical laughs. I think you and I will get on splendidly. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about, Abertha said, gazing at her hand in wonder. He'd just seen there was a barely visible pattern lacing its way along the white robotic hand, almost as delicate and intricate as the limb itself. Talk, she said with a mischievous smile. Oh yes, eventually. I'm sure there are other ways we can devise to pass the time. Abertha looked at her mesmerizing face with its seductive eyes and hungry mouth. He felt his heartbeat quicken, and he swallowed. He was pressing against his trousers urgently. He wanted her. Well, he said, I'm an excellent conversationalist, among other things. Abertha had never been with anyone with augmented limbs before, but having just engaged in 2 energetic rounds and now beginning a more sensual third, he found he would thoroughly recommend the experience. While the metallic arms and legs did take some getting used to at first, he found they gave her the ability to bend into some very creative positions. And while there were some complicated-looking attachments running down her spine, her large, perky breasts, flat stomach, and round, jiggling buttocks were very much organic, as was the most vital part of lovemaking on the female anatomy. "Oh shit, I'm coming," he gasped, attempting to withdraw, but she wrapped her powerful legs around his waist, thrusting him deeper. "Yes, harder!" she moaned insistently, and he obliged until he groaned and shuddered as he finished inside her. For a moment, he stayed inside her, reveling in the feel of her, the best and warmest kind of embrace. He still throbbed sporadically, and each time she responded with a gentle squeeze. If he wasn't so spent, the sensation would have made him ready for more. "Oh gods," he almost whimpered in ecstasy as he rolled off her. She nestled against him and planted gentle kisses on his chest. "I love the taste of your sweat." She breathed, moving up to his neck. She nipped him playfully with her teeth and giggled as he flinched. "I think this will be the start of a very satisfying friendship." For the next 2 months, Abertha was having the time of his life. It turned out Mara Wainwright was one of the Wainwrights, the illustrious wealthy family who imported precious metals from asteroids they owned that orbited the sun. She treated him to luxurious dinners at fine restaurants, took him to his first opera, where her personal friend, a very fat man called Diril, was performing, and she took him on a trip to see the ancient ruins of the pyramids. When they returned, she took him to her villa and showed him one of her prized possessions, a real horse, an animal that was said to have gone extinct years ago. When they weren't sightseeing or relaxing, they spent their time in bed. She had a formidable appetite for carnal pleasures, and he was eager to indulge them. Although he knew it wouldn't last, and that he should enjoy this short period of luxury while he couldn't help but begin to see her as more than just a wallet with remarkably ample proportions. He was beginning, against his better judgment, to develop feelings for her. One morning, he woke up before she did. The weather was growing cold, but the autumn sun shone brightly through the open curtains. The rays illuminated the dust particles in the air, making them twinkle as they drifted like a miniature galaxy. The sunlight turned her strawberry blonde hair into rippling liquid gold and highlighted the tiny hairs on her organic skin. She stirred, as if sensing his gaze, and turned to look at him with a sleepy smile. She purred and stretched like a cat, grinding against him and chuckling as she felt him grow hard almost instantly. "Good morning, Bertie," she murmured. "Morning, Mara," he whispered, kissing her shoulder. "Want some coffee?" she asked. "I'd love some." She slipped out of bed, shrugging into a silk dressing gown that left nothing to the imagination. She seemed to like doing little things like this. Despite having a horde of serfs and droid servants at her constant beck and call, She liked to make a point of doing certain tasks for him personally. She was forever feeding him little morsels. The cafetiere stood on the bedside table, and she flipped the little switch at the bottom. A droid would have already filled it with water and ground coffee beans while they slept, as well as placed the 2 clean cups beside it. She crossed to the window while it brewed and lit a cigarillo. Abertha watched contentedly as she gently blew reels of blue smoke. "Would you like to come to a party tonight?" she asked. He sat up and pulled on a jumper to keep away the chill. "A party?" he asked. "Yes," she said, turning to look at him. "Frightfully dull affair, I'm afraid. But with a handsome escort at my side, I might just bear it." "What? Is it one of those black tie things?" he asked. When she nodded wearily, he grinned. "You'll laugh," he said. "But I tried to get a friend to smuggle me into one of those kinds of parties. It was a few days before I met you." "Well, no need for such subterfuge now." She laughed. "I said I thought it must be one of those drug-fueled orgy parties." He smirked. She left the window and approached the bed, stubbing the butt of her cigarillo into an ashtray on the table. The dressing gown dropped to the carpet. She crawled under the covers, then wriggled beneath Abertha's jumper. Her head eased out of the top so they were nose to nose. He felt her breasts pressing against his chest. "And what did you imagine would be happening at this drug-fueled orgy?" she asked between kisses. "A load of rich toffs fucking, I suppose," he said. She grinned and bit his lower lip, pulling him into another kiss. "What if we went to a party like that?" she asked. She reached down and began to slowly stroke his shaft in long, fluid motions. "What if there were a dozen eyes on us? What would you do?" He tried to sit up, but she pinned him firmly in place. Now she began to rub the head of his penis against her clitoris in slow, circular motions. The more she teased him, the more desperate he grew. Her breathing was growing heavy against his ear, and he could hear as well as feel how slick and wet she was becoming as she kept him on the border of entering. "I wouldn't care who was watching," he breathed thickly. "I'd let them see how beautiful you are." He seized her by her plump rear and squeezed hard, simultaneously easing her downwards. The tip of him slipped a fraction inside, and she gave a little gasp of anticipation. But she still kept him at bay. "I'd run my hands all over you. I'd let you feel every inch of me." He was almost feverish now, intoxicated by the feel and smell of her. The jumper was hemming him in, and he wanted to burst from it. "I'd devour you," she said. Then, finally, she took him and she rode him hard and slowly until he literally tore the constricting garment off them both and flipped her on her back. Abertha felt like $1 million as he strode into the main entrance hall with Mara on his arm. He was dressed in a tuxedo Mara had gifted him. His shirt, tie, trousers, and patent leather Oxford shoes were black, while the dinner jacket, cufflinks, and the small rose in his buttonhole were white. Mara was dressed to contrast him in a figure-hugging black flamenco gown that left her shoulders bare, with scarlet peeking out from the folds of the frilly hem and sleeves. She wore 3-inch black stilettos with a red heel, and a scarlet faux fur shawl was draped about her shoulders to keep away the evening chill. Most of the people attending the party had some form of enhancement, be it cybernetic or anti-aging augmentations. Most of them wore a mixture of black and red, but Abertha noticed there were a few other who, like him, wore white with a white rose. He asked Mara about this, and she smiled. "It singles you out as an honored guest," she explained. "Everyone here knows everyone, so this is a way of distinguishing a newcomer. I'm afraid I'll have to introduce you over and over again to these prying busybodies." He laughed, finding he quite enjoyed being the center of attention. Even as she explained, he noticed a dozen eyes turn sharply to look at him with unabashed curiosity. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. There was a tinkling sound as the tray shook in the man's hand, and it was only then that Abertha recognized Gilderwin. His friend had changed since the last time he'd seen him. He was a little thinner, and his hair had grown so that bangs now hung low over his brow. He had shaved in a hurry. Abertha noticed a spot here and there he'd missed along the jawline, and there were bags under his eyes. He was staring at Abertha in surprise, and something else that might have been horror. "Abs," he croaked. Mara seemed to prick up her ears immediately, turning to fix Gilderwin with a stern expression. He gulped under her scrutiny. "Hey, Gil," Abertha grinned. He held open his jacket and did a 360 spin to show off his outfit. "What do you think?" Gilderwin didn't return his smile. He was sweating profusely as he glanced from Abertha to Mara, then back to his friend. "You look good," he said stiffly. "Champagne?" "Oh, Bertie," Mara suddenly said eagerly before Abertha could reply. "There's Dearil. Come along. I never got a chance to introduce you after his performance." Abertha flashed an apologetic smile to Gilderwin as he allowed himself to be led away. From the corner of his eye, he thought he saw Mara give Gilderwin a last venomous glare before they departed. But when he glanced down at her, she was all smiles, moving with ease and elegance, underlined by that intoxicating air of sensuality, and he told himself he was mistaken. "Let me guess," Mara said with a secretive grin. "That was the friend who tried to sneak you into the last party?" "Well, he refused, but yeah," Abertha confirmed cautiously. She laughed at his guarded answer. "Oh, darling, don't worry," she said. "I won't say a word, but best not draw too much attention to him. We wouldn't want to get him in trouble." He smiled at her gratefully. "Thanks," he whispered, planting a quick kiss on her shoulder. She nestled against him and nuzzled the side of his neck briefly in response. "Mara," Dearil proclaimed boisterously as they approached him and his group. "You vixen! Not introducing me to your fine young man and leaving me stranded with these unbearable bores." He waved a limp-wristed hand at his friends, and everyone laughed. Mara laughed, and they exchanged air kisses on one another's cheeks, Dearil making an exaggerated "moi" noise with puckered lips. "Dearil, I don't believe a word of it," Mara chuckled, tapping him playfully on his ample stomach. "As always, you're the life and soul of the party, and looking extremely pleased with yourself." "I have good reason, my dear." He beamed. He winked at Abertha and mouthed, "Ticket sales." There was general laughter from the group. Abertha felt a little out of his depth, but felt Mara give his hand a secretive squeeze of reassurance. "This is Bertie," said Mara. He was immeasurably grateful she didn't use his full name. She went around the circle of people, introducing them as she did so, while they shook Abertha's hand in conjunction with their introduction. There was a man named Bellinor, who was probably the most beautiful man Abertha had ever seen, even though he wasn't usually inclined to notice male beauty. He was tall and slender, with fair skin and blue eyes and golden hair that cascaded down his broad shoulders in immense, flowing locks. He was with his partner, a man called Carrie. He was not quite so good-looking as Bellinor, but still had a rugged charm about him. His curly chestnut hair extended down to sideburns that accentuated the squareness of his jawline. Then there was Sullivan and his wife, Layla. Both bore a striking resemblance to each other, until it was explained to Abertha that they were also siblings. Both of them had sallow skin and thick black hair. Of the group, they also had the most cybernetic enhancements. The only organic skin visible was their faces. Everything from below the neck was a glistening chrome with gold inlays. Their eyes had been replaced by spheres of tinted blue glass with a golden frame. Lastly, there was Amina. She was Diryl's guest, so she also wore white. She was very pretty. Her features were natural, which made her stand out from the sculptured, artificial beauty of the majority of the other guests. She was quite bonny and curvaceous, with a striking hourglass figure that drew the eyes of everyone around. She had large, pendulous breasts that had been stuffed into a very form-fitting evening dress with a plunging neckline. With every intake of breath, they swelled and heaved, and Abertha had to concentrate to maintain eye contact, which seemed to amuse rather than annoy Mara. Diryl had no such reservations, fawning over her incessantly. He had a habit of kissing her fingers that clearly made her uncomfortable. She fixed the group with a forced smile. When she did speak, her lowland accent was quite strong, though this seemed to embarrass her, and she did her best to hide it. "Ah, I adore my little bird," Diryl said, caressing Amina's shoulder with a pudgy hand. She made an obvious attempt not to shudder. "I must say, though, Mara, my dear, you seem to have done well for yourself. Such a well-proportioned, muscular man." He smiled disarmingly as he ran his eye over Abertha. He forced himself to smile politely at the compliment. "Now don't make him uncomfortable, you silver-tongued fox." Mara laughed. She smiled at Amina kindly. "You are very lovely, and we're very glad you joined us. You look wonderful in that gown." Abertha got the feeling of two fishermen comparing their catch. Mara was far more subtle than her friend. Her words had put Amina at ease. But he supposed this was what the rich did whenever they procured a new toy. They had to show them off and compare. The thought made him feel a little cheap. It was another reminder that, though he was enjoying the lavish lifestyle Mara had afforded him, it couldn't last forever. "I'm going to get a drink," he whispered to Mara. "Do you want anything?" "Are you all right?" she asked, casting an apologetic glance that took in the preening Diryl as he guffawed at his own jokes. "I'm fine. Don't worry." She kissed him tenderly on the cheek. "Hurry back," she entreated him. He smiled and went to find Gilduin. Gilduin, it seemed, had been hovering about the group the entire time, throwing anxious glances in their direction. As soon as Abertha left the group, he practically bounded over to him. "Abs, what the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, taking Abertha by the arm and leading him to a quiet corner. He forced himself to calm down. Abertha looked at him in astonishment. "There's still time. We keep spare uniforms in the staff rooms. Come with me before anyone notices." "What are you going on about?" Abertha whispered back, pulling away from Gilduin's pulling hands. His friend practically jumped with impatience and irritation. "There's no time," he snapped. "Once we get you out of here, you'll need to lay low, and—" "My dear fellow," Diryl boomed, joining them and smiling jovially. "Get lost on our way to the bar, did we?" Gilduin went white as a sheet, then stumbled, as if on the verge of passing out. "Gil!" Abertha started forward, but Diryl moved first. He was surprisingly quick for such a rotund man. "Goodness," he cried theatrically. "The poor fellow is overworked. You there!" He snapped his fingers at another server. "See this man gets a lie down and some refreshment. Quickly now, or you'll have me to answer to." The other waiter hastily grabbed Gilduin and led him away. "Slave drivers, sir," Diryl fumed, shaking his head. "Thank you for handling that," Abertha said evenly, annoyed by the man's interference, but not wishing to seem impolite to Mara's friend. "Not at all, my dear boy," Diryl gushed. "Now let's find that bar and fortify ourselves. I could do with a brandy." After getting 2 balloons of brandy, they rejoined their group, but Abertha struggled to blend in with the jovial mood. He couldn't think what had agitated Gilduin so much, and he was growing tired of their inane conversation. He couldn't believe that not so long ago He was begging Gilduin to sneak him into this. Even Mara wasn't acting like her normal self. He had always taken her as one who didn't suffer fools gladly, with a razor tongue to match that could put them in their place. Yet she laughed just as loudly at Diryl's idiotic jokes and attention-seeking antics. "Let's get out of here," he whispered. She turned to him in surprise, then gave him a look of comprehension and glanced at Diryl. "Soon, Bertie," she whispered back. "They're about to serve dinner, and I'm hungry. Afterwards, we'll make our excuses and leave. We could always eat at some quiet place," he said. "Just the two of us." She smiled. One of the main reasons to come to these parties is the banquet. It's simply to die for. It'll be an experience you can tick off your bucket list, and in future, we can avoid this sort of function again. He sighed, a nagging voice in the back of his mind telling him he should probably leave, and this moment was going to be his only chance. Then he chided himself, and with a nod and a quick peck on her shoulder, he relented. "And what are our two lovebirds whispering about?" grinned Diryl. "Really, Diryl," said Bellinor in his permanently bored tones. "They'd hardly whisper if they intended you to announce it to the whole room." Diryl shot him an affronted glance before quickly softening his features. "Our gallant white knight," he chuckled. "Oh, my hero," said Mara dramatically, raising a hand to her brow and pretending to swoon. "Yes, don't mind me, my boy," Diryl said to Abertha. He paused before adding in an overly casual tone, "I suppose I'm just a nosy old bugger." He smiled sweetly at Bellinor. "I've been told," Bellinor said, fixing Diryl with a cold stare, "by a very reliable source, might I add, that it takes one to know one." "Now then, you two," said Layla, smoothly halting any further barbs. "Let's not spoil the evening with this bickering. We were getting along famously too. I wager that when dinner is served, tempers will be mellowed." It was impossible to tell from behind the tinted glass, but Abertha was almost certain she cast a sideways glance at him. Diryl bounced forward and graciously took her by the hand and kissed it wetly. "Was there ever a paragon of wisdom and beauty personified thus?" he said. "My lady, I bow to both." Just then, a gong rang out, a long, echoing note. The head waiter cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, would you make your way to the banquet hall?" The grand banqueting hall was a feast for the eyes. The wallpapered walls were white, with a subtle honeysuckle and primrose print. The ceiling was high, with a crystal chandelier in the center. The accent wall was blue, with a gold and marble fireplace and gold-framed mirror that made the room seem twice its size. The banquet table nearly stretched the length of the room. It was a heavy oak table with matching chairs, with figures performing some sort of ritual carved into the legs of the table and the tops of the high-back chairs. Each place had a name card to indicate where the guests should sit. To the side on the right-hand wall, 6 waiters, including Gilduin, were standing on a raised platform behind 6 chairs with crimson velvet padding. Abertha realized that he was one of 6 newcomers in white. "What's going on?" he hissed in Mara's ear uneasily. She turned with a little smile. "Oh, just this silly welcome farce they do at these dinner parties," she murmured, somehow rolling her eyes in scorn and entreating him to play along with an embarrassed glance, almost simultaneously. "In a way, it's an honor. Or at least, there isn't any malicious intent. It won't take long, and the food is worth being ogled for a few seconds." Abertha was now getting tired of these ridiculous people and their ridiculous whims. Even Mara had dropped a little in his estimation, but he was still lured by the ritz and glamour of it all. While that small voice told him to leave, a louder voice at the forefront of his mind relished being the center of attention. A young working-class lad being honoured by all these self-serving, self-satisfied, smug toffs. He heard Sullivan and Kari talking to each other in low voices. "I've been told we're having barbecued meat this time," Kari said, lighting a cigar. "You'll ruin your palate if you smoke before you eat," said Sullivan with a thin-lipped smile. "Actually, I consider it a suitable accompaniment for smoky meat." Kari grinned, the cigar gripped between his teeth and trails of smoke curling from his mouth as he laughed. Abertha licked his lips. He was very fond of BBQ. The head waiter, after welcoming the guests and instructing them to find their seats, gathered up the 6 guests in white clothes. Amena gravitated next to Abertha nervously. The head waiter waved them towards the seats on the platform. Abertha sighed and turned to get this foolish little ritual over and done with. Mara caught him by the sleeve, waylaying him. He looked at her questioningly, and she pulled him to her and kissed him deeply on the mouth. Gods, but the woman was insatiable. "Darling Bertie," she said, running a finger across his lips before kissing him again. "I know this is troublesome. I'll make it up to you later." "I'm sure I can think of something," he said with a grin. She gave him another one of her mesmerizing, seductive smiles. "So can I," she said, going on tiptoe to whisper in his ear. "I can't wait to have you inside me." That would be the final time Abertha saw her, a memory of her standing still as her peers flocked around her, gliding past her like a river current flowing around a stone. She was smiling, that mischievous, sensual smile. Then the head waiter harried the white-clad group to their chairs impatiently. As he approached his chair, he saw Gilduin staggering off the platform, and his place being hastily filled by another waiter. Abertha decided he would find him later. Clearly, Gilduin's drinking was affecting his job. Now he thought about it. Abertha hadn't been much of a friend to him in the last few weeks. He'd been so preoccupied with his sweeping love affair with Mara. He hadn't found time to worry about what his friend was going through. He sat down in his allotted chair, his face set with determination. He'd get this over with, and then talk to Gilduin. He had to make things right. There was a tinkling sound as someone rapped a piece of cutlery against a glass for silence. The gentle hum of conversation died instantly. There seemed to be a collective breath being held. The host had risen from his chair at the head of the table. He was clad in gold cybernetic armor under loose-fitting black robes, and he had the most penetrating gaze Abertha had ever seen. The man's eyes were a dazzling sapphire blue, and they hardly seemed to blink. Abertha didn't know his name, and something told him that had been deliberately kept from him. This was the first time he'd even noticed the man at his own party. "My friends," said the host in a deep, reverberating voice, "I humbly thank you for once again attending one of my little gatherings." Polite titters of laughter rang out from the guests. Deeril's boisterous "haw, haw, haw" was louder than the rest. "And of course, I must thank those of you who chose to expand our little circle of friends." He turned those unblinking eyes on Abertha and the others in white with a smile that was almost predatory. It unsettled Abertha, and he turned away from the man's eyes, deciding instead to survey the other guests. That same predatory expression was mirrored in their faces. It was almost as if they were undressing him with their eyes, yet it wasn't in a sexual way. It was something else. Something, if possible, more disturbing than that. "I don't like this," Amina said in a small voice. Abertha glanced at her. She was staring in horror at the other guests. And it wasn't just her. Everyone in white was beginning to panic, but were oddly still bound by the laws of etiquette. They clearly wanted to stand up, but instead they just remained in their seats and looked about the room, as if waiting for someone to give them a social cue. The blue-eyed host's voice rang out. "And now, my friends, We have our little appetizers set out already. So let us not dally and get to the moment we've all awaited with eager anticipation. Let the preparation of the main course begin." Abertha's head was seized from behind and slammed into the back of the chair. Before he could fully raise his hands to defend himself, he felt something pass across his throat. There was no pain, but now he couldn't breathe. He tried to draw breath, but instead gurgled thickly. He pressed his hands to his neck, but it was warm and slippery. He looked down at himself. A red dinner jacket. He could have sworn he'd been wearing white. Darkness was closing in from the edges of his vision, but he fought to keep the darkness at bay. Something fell against his shoulder, and he toppled from his chair to the floor. Now he was lying down. The will to fight seemed to slowly drain out of him. Instead, he felt the need to sleep. He was vaguely aware his body was convulsing, but that seemed irrelevant now. He closed his eyes. Mara was a little somber as she took a sip of her wine. Of all the flies that had been caught in her web, she'd taken quite a liking to Abertha. He had been so very uncomplicated. He hadn't tried to put on airs and compete with her out of some deep-rooted insecurity of being from an inferior social class. He'd been handsome, charming, and wonderful in bed. She sighed as she laid her napkin across her lap. She would enjoy him. To dishonor him by wasting even a morsel would be ingracious. She looked about the table. The guests were eating and drinking with gusto, a pleasant atmosphere and merry company. You might have thought that the scene would be grotesque, a horde of crazed people with blood-soaked lips and fingers tearing into raw chunks of flesh with a feverish hunger. Instead, it was like any other civilized gathering. The food smelled delicious. The meat was so tender, it sloughed right off the bone. Diril was eating a dish comprised of Amena's breast meat. The sweet, fatty meat was soaked in grease that dripped down his chins. He also had a smaller dish of her fingers. A lot of people tended to like the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, for the sweet and salty flavoring of the meat. The breasts of Amena and the other female victims were also a favorite among the guests. Women with large natural breasts, which would therefore make an excellent delicacy of the fatty meat, had been specifically targeted. Of course, thighs, buttocks, and even the leaner meat on the back and arms were carefully butchered, seasoned, and prepared for consumption, but it was the edible internal organs that proved to be the most popular. Mara glanced up from the selection of dishes marked Abertha on cards attached to the serving dishes. She was a little indecisive, but then she smiled as she saw Gilduin making his way around the table with the wine carafe, refilling glasses. She got his attention by raising her empty glass and tilting it expectantly. He blanched when he saw her. Then, after clearly mustering his courage, he approached her. More wine, madam," he stammered. He made as if to pour, but Mara placed her hand over the glass, her eyes fixed on him. Gilduin's hands began to tremble. "It was wrong of you to try to warn him," she said. "Fear and adrenaline could ruin the taste of the meat. Luckily for you, I've been informed that hasn't been the case." She saw the flicker of pure hatred in his eyes and smiled in sad understanding. "You see, I made sure the last 2 months of Bertie's life were absolute bliss. It not only ensures the best condition of the meat, but it's also kind to Bertie." "Yes, madam," Gilduin said, barely containing his fury. Only a deep dread and mortal fear stopped him from snatching a steak knife from the table and ramming it right in her eye socket. "Will there be anything else?" "Well, that's just it," she said with a coy smile. "I'm terribly indecisive today. I tell you what, would you serve me a little of that, please?" She indicated a serving dish. Gilduin placed the carafe down carefully as if inwardly convincing himself not to use it as a weapon, and began to ladle food onto her plate. She watched him closely, smiling sweetly all the while. The dish in question was spiced meats, comprising of the heart, liver, and kidneys, in a rich sauce of onion and peppers served over rice with a garnish. The aroma was mouth-watering as it wafted from the dish. That was the most sickening part about it, to Gilduin. The cooks prepared the dishes like any other recipe comprised of animal flesh. So the food inevitably always smelled delicious. The people who ate the dishes weren't cartoonishly evil. They were certainly evil, as they had the wealth, seductive charm, and charisma to flatter and entice their prey. But to look at them now, they seemed very ordinary as they laughed, talked about one another's troubles, and exchanged gossip, all in the spirit of camaraderie. "Will that be all, madam?" Gilduin asked again. He was careful not to look at the dish itself as he placed the plate in front of her. "A moment, if you would," Mara said. "What was your name again?" Gilduin shot a look over each shoulder as if he was about to bolt. "Gilduin, madam." "Oh yes, of course," she said with a musical laugh. Gilduin was sure there was a device in her throat to enhance the sound and make the laugh as enchanting as it was. The idea repulsed him. "Well, Gilduin, in many cultures throughout history, cannibalism has been seen as more than just a means of surviving starvation or honoring the native gods. There is the enjoyment of the taste itself. Many people see it as a taboo subject, and I suppose that, if like tonight, murder for consumption was the end result, rather than eating already dead remains, there may be a general feeling of revulsion on some people's part. Are you following?" He nodded coldly. She smiled again with relief as she selected a dessert spoon and began to stir the meat and rice together. She did this for an unnecessarily long time, her eyes never leaving Gilduin. "I suppose even in that," she continued, "there is an underlying sentiment of hypocrisy. Once life has left the body, it really is only just meat. Animals prey upon each other, including members of their own species, all the time. But there is a spiritual element to this as well, I believe. You see, that's why people have a moral objection to eating human flesh. Putting aside the hypocrisy of hunting being acceptable within the animal kingdom but not us, the only moral objection is that the flesh once housed the spirit, the being, the essence, whatever you wish to call it, of a person. That objection doesn't seem as potent when it comes to the souls of cattle, sheep, and swine. But let us ignore that for the present. What people don't realize is that there is also a form of cannibalism that suits this viewpoint perfectly." She was gathering up a large heap of food with her spoon on the plate, making sure there were plenty of chunks of meat among the grains of rice. She seemed to be enjoying herself. Gilduin just wished she would get to the point of whatever she was rambling about. "In times of war," she was saying, "warriors would sometimes eat the heart or the liver of fallen enemies to inherit their warrior spirit for themselves. The liver was considered just as important as the heart in the ancient world, so both these organs were regularly removed and consumed raw there and then on the battlefield, or cooked and served later. But there was also the consumption of flesh during times of sorrow, at the funeral of a family member, or perhaps a dear friend. It was believed that eating a small portion of the deceased would transfer a small portion of their spirit too, allowing them to live on through you forever. It was a way of honoring them, of celebrating their life joyfully rather than grieving." Mara lifted the spoon, piled with the meat, and after blowing on it, held it up to Gilduin's horror-stricken face. His legs were turning to jelly, and he steadied himself against her chair. She didn't object to his unprofessionalism. Her smile widened. Despite all her augmentations, surgeries, and facelifts designed to enhance her beauty tenfold, in that moment she resembled a grotesque creature with vaguely human features to Gilduin. "I can't," he said tearfully. "Please don't make me." She hushed him gently, like a mother trying to convince a fussy child to try a new dish. "I honor him," she insisted, moving closer with the spoon. "We both loved him in our own way, didn't we? Let's both take him into us. Let him dwell there for as long as we live." The whole room was watching now, with smirks and chuckles of amusement. Mara had taken Gilduin by the back of the head with one hand, ignoring the hair drenched in sweat, and was guiding the spoon towards his mouth with the other. Gilduin closed his eyes and opened his mouth. He began to chew, slowly and laboriously at first. Then there was an involuntary smacking of lips. He began to chew faster. Then he swallowed and unconsciously licked his lips afterwards. "Well?" Mara asked expectantly. "How was it? Would you recommend this dish?" With tears running down his face, he nodded. "It was delicious, madam," he said. Then the whole room erupted in uncontrollable laughter. The end.